Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Arlena Jones here at the Public Media Network, and I have a very, very special show that I'm airing here. I have the gentleman from the union, and I'm actually going to let them break down and explain each one of their positions and what it is that they do. And I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit about how they got started and a little bit of like what they were doing at 12 before they came into this position for those of you who are considering moving over into the greater things in life. And I can start with you, please, Mr. Cameron.
Okay. My name's Cameron. I'm an organizer in the IBW. I work for the state, so I'm all over the state working in different jurisdictions all the time. So when I was younger, though, I was really big into hooking stereo cars up, technological stuff with wires, things of that nature. I was really good at math and science. I tried to go to college like traditionally, but it ended up not being a good route for me to take. I needed something a lot more hands-on. So I was able to get into the apprenticeship, and ever since then, it's been it's been great. Like so, when I first started, I didn't know anything. So they taught me everything from the first day, a lot of hands-on experience, and I got raises every year. So as you learn more, you make more, and I didn't have to pay for it. It's what they call learn while you're working in the field. So that worked out well for me. So now, as I'm working as an organizer, my main jobs that I do now is one, I try to help workers who are interested in coming, who are in non-union now but want to come to the union for union work. I help those people. Also, people who want to unionize the shop that they're already in. And I try to tell people this. We also like we're a resource for all workers. Like all workers need representation. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of laws that a lot of people don't know anything about. So when it comes to things like prevailing wage, the Department of Wage and Hour. So like what is it? Wage theft is a big problem in our country right now. But when it happens to a lot of workers, they don't even know who to reach out to. So we try to be a resource not only to just electrical workers, but to all workers out here right now because like I tell my friend all the time, we go to high school for what, 12 years? You go to school, and when people get out, they don't know not one labor law there to protect them. And the saddest thing is if 1% has all the wealth, 99% are going to be workers. So it's almost as though it's already set up so the worker can't defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the reasons I feel like it's important to have representation for workers, especially in the time we're in now where the cost of living is rising, the wealth inequality is getting even greater. That's probably why companies like Walmart and Amazon try so hard to get unions out. It's not so much that there's no room to negotiate so people can have a higher quality of life. It's more so like when you look at a factor of business, labor, the best businesses look at labor like it's just something you pay. And if the lowest you can pay for your labor, the more profitable your business can be. But that's not equitable for our communities that we're living in. So one big thing I do is just try to raise the livelihood of people's lives, try to raise that up, and try to bring social justice and try to make everything equitable for people both at work and at home.
And that's from the state level.
That's from, yes, I work for the state
Okay.
of Michigan, so all over.
And how does someone tap into that information?
Well, if anybody's interested in either unionizing their shop or becoming a part of a union, I would say go to ibewmichigan.com.
Okay.
At that website, you'll fill out a questionnaire. Somebody will reach out to you. And if you don't have any experience, they'll definitely point you in the right direction of an apprenticeship to get started in. And if you already have experience in the field, then we can directly plug you in to talk to an organizer in a local jurisdiction to let you know what steps to go on further.
Thank you.
No problem.
And I'll let you
Yep,
tell
yep.
your story as well. We'll get back to
what
that.
the questions were. My name's Ryan Lewis. I'm a member of IBW Local 131 in Kalamazoo.
Okay.
Started my apprenticeship 2008. It was a 5-year apprenticeship at the time. Got out in 2013. Kind of pretty much steadily employed the whole time. Back in probably March this year, will be 4 years I've been in the office of our union hall. My job is membership development organizer. Kind of go hand in hand with Cameron here.
Mm-hmm.
My jobs kind of go out, and seek the unrepresented electrician in my jurisdiction, and not so much go into used car salesman, but just at least give them the information of, hey, this is who we are, this is what you're gonna get paid, this is your retirement, this is your health insurance, just give them some truths so they can, not that money is everything, but really, when you're just kind of talking about money, it's, sometimes a business decision. So I just make sure they have all the information they need that I can give them so they can make an appropriate business decision.
So when you were 12 and 13, did you see yourself in this role?
No, not one bit. I was a reckless child who sought, adrenaline, so I'm sure my parents did not want me anywhere around electricity. How did I stumble upon this? That's kind of how it did happen. I kind of stumbled upon it.
Okay.
Went to college, didn't work out. Friend of the family, he's retired now. He kind of pointed me in the direction of, why don't you go on down to the Union Hall and fill out an application for the apprenticeship, and the rest is history.
Okay.
I tell people the best job I ever had was a factory job, because that was the time in my life I knew it was about time to grow up. I didn't want to do that for too much longer. So yeah, back to when I was 12, Legos, Connects, that's what I kind of preach when I go and talk to, these vocational schools or middle schools or high schools, I used to play with, these little plastic bricks, now my plastic bricks are replaced with raw material and metal, and now my little instruction booklets are, giant sets of prints. It just goes hand in hand, I guess.
John?
All right, my name is Jonathan Curran. I am the business manager, financial secretary for IBEW Local 131. So we're electrical workers, electricians, we're all here from the IBEW. I got my start, my professional life began when I was about 15. I started working for an oncologist. My mother was a nurse there. She said, come down, work summers here, do data entry. I ended up working there for 7 years. I assisted bone marrow biopsies. I ran labs. I helped audit billing records, did a lot of things for this private oncologist. Saw a lot of things. It kind of forces you to grow up when you go into work every day and you see people who are going to be dead in 6 months, right? So, but I left there and I went to Western Michigan University, and I attended the university for just shy of 4 years. Had done some community college before that, and I graduated with degrees in psychology and English. So I had 2 degrees, graduated magna cum laude. I got out of college, and I got a job working random shifts in adult foster care for about $8.50 an hour. So before I went to college, I was making $10 an hour, working 60 hours a week. And then I went to, I went out of college. I was making less and really struggling financially. Obviously, it was a different time economically. I left the college that I worked for. I left them in August of 2008, and so the economy tanked. And then when I got out of college, I got a much lower paying job, and it became very apparent to me that it was going to be difficult to find a career where I had a stake and where I had interest. Everything was entry level. Everything was $10 an hour or less, with maxing out at 15, 16 bucks an hour. It just was very clear that the economics didn't add up. I had $60,000 in student loans by that time. And so I made a career change. The one thing that I did have in college is I met somebody who was an IBEW member. His father actually owned one of our signatory contractors. At the time it was called Kalamazoo Electric. And he said, hey, there's this thing called an apprenticeship, and you should probably go check it out. You really got a good last name for it. And so that's what I did, and it was a life changer for me to go from not even getting 40 hours a week consistently at $8.50 an hour. I immediately started at $13 plus, so that was a huge boost. But then every year you get significant raises, and when I topped out as a journeyman, I was making over $30 an hour. So that's a life-changing decision, right? It's one of those things that you can't express appreciation enough for that opportunity to not only uh, be given a wage and benefits, you get wages, you get health care, and you get retirement. Um, it's, it's more than all those things, right? You appreciate the opportunity, the community, and to give back to that is hugely important as an IBEW member. So when I became a journeyman inside wireman, said to my wife, it's great to be an electrician, but I need to do more. And so I told her right then that my mission, aside from being a good electrician, was to make Kalamazoo a labor town, because that's how we secure our futures, and that's how we secure the future of our community. Because if everybody is facing the same economic circumstances that I'm facing, then we have issues. Things aren't going to be headed in the right direction.
I 100% agree with you when you say like Kalamazoo needs to be focused on labor. One of the things that I see in Kalamazoo a lot is there's a lot of construction going on in Kalamazoo. And I ask, how many of our local citizens are getting these jobs? How many of our local citizens are working on everything you see around here? Because then if the money is coming from outside contractors, then they're taking their money back outside of the city of Kalamazoo. And the best way to keep the money in Kalamazoo is to make sure that we have a pool of people who are working and can stay in the city of Kalamazoo, keep the money in Kalamazoo. It spreads out across families and communities, schools, etc. And I always told the three of you that my father was a cement construction mason, and when I was a girl, everywhere we went, he was like, I built this, I built I-94, I built Bronson, I built Western. Everywhere we go, he always showed me places that he had hands on in building and taking pride in his work. And at the same time is when you help build it, you want to take care of it. So I believe that if people are involved in helping to build the city of Kalamazoo, they'll also take care of it. Then there will be less litter, and there will be less crime and less, issues that we have in the city because people put their hard work and their labors into it, and they're respected more.
Well, when I think about what you just said, I think about labor, and I think every company should unionize because having that quality of life comes through collective bargaining. So, which basically means like if one person wants something, it's very hard for them to get it. But if every nurse goes in and says they want to raise but it will happen more often if you have more people, right? So that could happen in all sorts of things, not even just the trades, not even in just construction. I've know coffee baristas who are unionized, like furniture manufacturers who are unionized. So any company can unionize, and I believe that's where the change happens when you're trying to uplift people's lives. Because as Curran said, with financial stability, with dignity and respect at work, like most people spend just as much time at work as they do at home.
More.
And with these benefits, that's going to completely transform your life. But some people think you just have to be in the trades to be in the union. No, you can unionize just about any.
I was one of the people that thought you had to be in a trade to be unionized. So can we talk about that a little bit more? Because that was new. That's like super new information to me.
Yeah, so if you don't mind.
No, please go ahead.
The Wagner Act is something that was passed in the 1930s, right? That has established a National Labor Relations Board, and that board basically said that any worker outside of perhaps public arena, but anybody who works for a hourly wage has the right to collective bargain. You have the right to sign a card, and then once 30% of people in any organization sign a
Authorization
card. Thank you. You can see I was struggling there. But once 30% of people sign an authorization card, they have the right to file for an election with the NLRB. There are some exceptions to who the NLRB covers, but for the most part, most of your listeners who are working for an hourly wage, they can file for an election with the National Labor Relations Board and unionize their workplace. It doesn't matter if you are, at a Starbucks, a media company, the local oil change place. Anyone can vote to have a union, and most probably should be. There are a whole lot of people in our community who are subject to unilateral changes, whether it's, nurses having the retirement unilaterally reduced because somebody at a corporate level decides that that's how they're going to make the economics work. That should be a two-way conversation. right? There are people who invest in businesses with their money, which they may or may not have earned, and then there are people who invest in those businesses with their time and their livelihoods, right? They are depending on those businesses every bit as much as an investor is. We invest our time because that's what we have. And to be subject to unilateral decisions that lower your living standard, that lower your ability to retire, that affect how much you have to pay into healthcare, to have those decisions made for you without any say is not, it's not democratic, and frankly I find it un-American.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I keep saying it to myself, between union and non-union, we're all
Okay,
just,
thank you.
yeah, we're all just people trying to provide for our families. Like, we all go to the work for the same reasons, to provide for our families, to have a little bit of security, some optimism for the future, a good life for our kids. We all want the exact same thing. But, and I know we always want to agree on everything, but through collective bargaining, let's start there with the things that are directly affect our quality of life.
And you said that it has to be 30% of the people. Like how big? Like how many people can it be? 10 and the 3 say we gonna do this.
Yeah,
Really?
it could be as few as, you can have 3 people, and if they decide that they want to collectively bargain, they can do so. But people have to understand that just because you form a union doesn't mean that you're gonna get everything you want, right? It begins a negotiation. There may be work situations where people find that it's simpler to just go in and talk to people at a face-to-face level, and that's fine. But oftentimes, people get rebuffed in those situations, and they should consider what their actual rights are and learn about them. Folks like us are available, but it can be hard to find union organizers.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
It is, and believe me, because I struggle myself, because I'm somebody who's trying to create a more active labor scene, and it can be very difficult to find local labor organizers, because we need to be connected for our own reasons to support each other. So I would say that that's like definitely something that each person should be keeping in mind. But it can be a very difficult thing to go through an organizing campaign.
How does that look? How would one start that?
So I mean, I suppose that probably the best first step is to talk to an organizer to make sure that you're doing it the right way. You may want to broach your coworkers and see how they are feeling about something of that sort, if they feel like that's a move that they would like to make. But you also have to be careful, because retaliation is a thing.
That was gonna be my
And-
next thing. Yeah.
And
Please.
you're only protected from retaliation if you know your rights, and you know how to document, and you know how to keep track of things, and then also you file potential unfair labor practices. There's a whole lot that goes into it. I don't want to get too much into
Yeah, it's
it.
basically big businesses against it, and the people in this room are the ones trying to push towards it. So it's grassroots all the way. But usually, what I find is, you talk to a worker who is interested in starting in a union at his shop. You have him talk to his other workers who are interested, and you just start building it from there organically. Because if you try to rush anything, it gets out of hand. So, step by step.
And the first thing, is it online? Like, how do you get like I said, now that you have organized and we're saying,
I would have to imagine the first step of either joining a union or, forming a union is, you and a coworker, having a conversation during break that kind of leads to you both, or, you all, however big the group is, deciding that you want a better situation. You have to get there first before you can even think about, okay, what's the next step? You gotta know that this is where you are. This is, you want to go somewhere else. What's between there? It's conversations. It's it's hard to say what it's gonna look like. But once you and a coworker, kind of make a decision that we're done with. We're done with our short breaks. We're done with not getting breaks. We're done being told we have to work this weekend. We're done with, and that's, a lot of people that come to us, it's not because they're seeking more money. It's usually because they're seeking better working conditions.
okay.
And that's the big thing right there. Once you kind of have that, you and, if it's the 4 of us at work, you know, it's you and, or me and John, or me and Cam, or whatever it is, you know, once we make that decision, then, you know, what's the next step? You know, you could reach out to us, you know, we can, you know, figure out if there's a representation, you know, if there's a local or a local union that could represent you, get them in talks with them, you know, maybe we could represent you. But, you know, it's more or less, you know, you and a coworker, you and your workforce kind of coming up with a decision that you want a better situation.
You have mentioned the retaliation, and I think that that is like a really hard thing to accept. Like, it's because it's scary. Like, you know, as I've been kind of like pushing, hey, Kalamazoo, we need we need workers in Kalamazoo working these jobs. People have said to me just in private, like, you can say that, Arlena, because you don't have to worry about losing anything. If I say anything, I can lose my job, and you know, then that to me looks like was it human trafficking? If you are able to lose your job because you want to make more than $15 an hour and you're scared to say something, or you're working on a work site that you're not feeling safe, or that you can't express yourself, or you're seeing unfair things happening to you, that's also like, to me again, and I use the word human trafficking because I looked at the definition of what it is, and wages and withholding wages is one of those things. And so looking at it from that capacity, then that is why, you know, I'm saying that, and I'm like, people are afraid. You have men who are working, who are ultimately like hard workers, and I mean women too, but they're afraid that they're going to lose their job, they're going to lose their livelihood, they're not going to be able to take care of their children because of the retaliation. So you want to speak on that, or like?
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll give a good example.
Okay.
In the construction industry, we know that a majority of construction workers in the South, presumably all non-union, but they will be required to work more than 40 hours without getting overtime, right?
Oh.
So that not only violates what would be in our contract, that violates federal law. If you don't have a representative there for that, then your employer's probably going to get away with that. Wage theft is a very real thing.
Yep.
Where, especially in construction industry, where people will go to work, they'll help build somebody's house, and then the contractor they work for stiffs them. And they're put in a position where, well, I can file a wage complaint with the local, you know, the local community attorney, public attorney, prosecutor.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Public
Take your.
prosecutor.
It's fine.
So you can file a wage complaint with them, but that person still may be the source of your next job, especially in the construction industry. So do you put that relationship on the line to get what is due to you, right? And how much of that will somebody take before they're willing to end a relationship to get what's owed to them?
Okay.
Right. So that kind of retaliation happens all the time, though, where somebody will bring something up, and the employer will say, "Well, you know, that's fine. You can leave. You're not going to work here anymore." You know, and what's your recourse then? You know, do you file the wage complaint? Do you go to? Most people don't even know the laws. They have, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, they don't.
You're going to file a lawsuit. You know, these are things that working people don't have access to.
Yep.
You know, there's very few of us that can just go and find a lawyer to go after what might be $200 on your check, right? But $200 is a lot to a working person. So that kind of retaliation it's pretty pervasive. When people talk about unionizing, it's not unusual for employers to put cameras in the workplace, to start laying people off who want to talk about. Organizers get fired quite frequently, unfortunately. So these are all things that if you don't already have a collective bargaining contract, it makes things difficult. But the way we address that is by standing up as a community and saying this is something we care about.
Okay.
And you know, going from there, it really is some pretty major issues. But it has a lot to do with where this country is at, where it's been, and where we're going, right? I think that a lot of it revolves around how workers see themselves and whether they have a voice at the table.
Definitely need to see workers supporting workers more.
Okay.
I'm not really saying workers supporting workers, because if the 1% can make all those decisions and the workers aren't even supporting workers to organize, Who is? Like, so as the IBW, we represent workers, and unions represent workers. Who else is? Like, if you go to court and if you go to court, the judge is going to say, "Do you have a lawyer?" And
Right.
if you don't, he's going to give you one. Every worker goes to work, and all these laws are supposed to be protecting them, but yet and still, no one's giving them a lawyer or a representation.
Is there a website where people can know the laws?
Yep, so National Labor Relations Board,
Okay.
if you look that up, there's information on those websites. There are a lot of unions out there who place information on their websites. You know, anyone can look up and read about the Wagner Act. You can read about it on Wikipedia.
Okay.
Those are all good resources. If you have questions, look it up. You know, and I don't want to put everybody on the spot here, but if you look up your local IBW hall
Mm-hmm.
and try to call them, I mean, I know if you call our hall, we'll at least talk to you about it. That's always kind of the probably the best way to get a quick explanation is talking to an experienced organizer. But there's a lot of resources out there. The AFL-CIO is, they have web pages with information. Unite Here is another one that really puts out a lot of information on their web page. You know, Robert Reich is another one that likes to talk about union rights and workers' rights a lot too. So he's another good resource to watch some of his videos.
That is wonderful information because like you said, my father was a union man, but now, and I work in financial industry, so I work across the board. I find that there are so few companies that I speak to that are union, and like you said, things have changed. Why would you say, you know, and I'm gonna say the 80s, you know, it was like big, like there were a lot. Now there's so less group of unions. Can anybody can jump in and kind of talk about what their feelings about from then to now and how we kind of go back to that, because there was some really great things with the union.
Yeah, so we're getting deep here now.
Okay.
So the Wagner Act was passed in the 1930s, and there's a boom of unions, especially in the union trades, right? The IBW used to have about 90% market share. We're down to about 30% today, and you saw that shift happen in the 1970s. It's not by accident. There's a group called the Labor Law Reform Group, who is basically an organization of business leaders at the CEO type level who decided that they were going to push back policy-wise against workers' rights. They eventually formed something called the Business Roundtable, which exists today, and they really started by going after the building trades in the 70s. The building trades were not perfect organizations. They were vulnerable on a lot of fronts, including, you know, supporting very strongly the Vietnam War, and so they lost a lot of the left-leaning support in this country. And so with that vulnerability, you know, it kind of became open season on labor unions, especially in 1980 when Ronald Reagan busted the Air Traffic Controllers Union, right? So that's a union that endorsed his campaign, and then he came back and said, well, you're going to stop the strike in 1980, or you're all going to get fired. And about, I believe, 2/3 of them were fired and were never allowed to work in the aviation industry again. And we saw a drastic decrease in workers' rights and unionization in this country. It also, in many ways, precipitated globalization and the sort of liberalization, as we call it. Our economy is shifted away from an economy where we really focused on protecting workers. And I think that if you ask most people whether they prefer the economy before that or the one that we have today, I think that most people would say that they prefer the economy prior. I think that there's a whole lot of evidence. There's a racial component to it, particularly in this state. In 1980, the wealth gap between black workers and white workers in the state was as narrow as any workers in the United States. Between 1980 and 2017, black workers in this state lost about 20% of their income when adjusted for inflation. That is largely because the union jobs disappeared, right? The auto industry took a hit.
Yep.
The trades all took a hit. We went from having, you know, I think in late 70s, we were probably at 50-60% unionized in the IBW and most building trades, and now the construction industry as a whole is about 10% unionized. And over that same period of time, construction efficiency has gone down by 40%. So, there's a lot there to digest. But, I spend a lot of time researching these things. There's actually a study that came out in the last year or two that shows that non-union workers, construction workers, make 42% less on the check and 78% less overall. That is a world of difference. They have basically taken what used to be craftsmanship and careers and degraded it to something that is basically a turn and burn model, where they bring people in, they have them work for a year or two, they have one experienced person who jumps around from job site to job site, and so it's not really a career for the vast majority of people working in that side of construction. That's mostly the commercial and residential area. The IBW, we have a lot of industrial heavy. There's a real bifurcation there, though, between union construction workers who are making good livings and a whole lot of other construction workers who are not necessarily having that opportunity. It's very important to the people who are seeking careers in the trades that they know the difference, because they may spend years, if not decades, chasing the life of a craftsman while being used up if they can't find their way to a union job.
We had discussed kind of and thank you, because that kind of tied into a conversation that we had prior to the show of having a single income household. And you mentioned how things changed to a single household income to now two working individuals in a household, and just can you kind of piggyback off of what he said with that being the discussion of far as the income, the disparity, the gap, and how all of that kind of tied together versus today's economy?
Yeah, I don't have so much of the history knowledge that John has, but I do know that we kind of negotiate that, this can be a single income job for a whole household. I think we have the wages, the benefits that, will back that. Now if you're sitting there and you're the Brady Bunch, that might be a different story. If you want, vacations in the Rockies and, down in the Keys, then maybe that's a different story. But, if you're, like me growing up, Cedar Point in the summer times, going on, to Echo Valley when you can, vacations, spring breaks, that's, I had a childhood that, yes, this income can support that. It's not that, I needed the best vacations or anything like that. It was time spent with the family, and that's another thing that I like to preach. When I go out and I try to talk to the non-union workers in our areas, you got to do something with your time. You only got so much time. How much is your time worth? And that's what I like to, make sure that they understand. You're going to leave your family in the morning. You're not going to get there until night. What are you bringing home? What are you leaving them for? What are you getting out of that? So I just, I like everybody to be fat and happy and with their families.
Amen.
So, that's what I like.
Well, back to what John was saying, when I think back around the 1970s, and I think they said before that, so the amount workers were earning and the amount companies were profiting were almost parallel with each other till around that JFK time, where the air traffic controllers, right? So
Yeah, Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan,
Yeah.
okay. That one.
That's all right. We get to have errors in life. That's okay. We're still good.
But my point is and I said it earlier, it's the middle class will support the 1%, but the 1% doesn't support the middle class. We're watching the laws and the policies that's been coming out year over year, and most of that's because better lobbyists. The 1% have some of the best lobbyists in the world compared to the middle class, which have basically none, and that's basically been rolling in politics for the last 20 years. So that's why I say workers need to support workers, because it's 99% of us are workers. So, and then what they also say, the wealth inequality now is worse than in the 1960s with the Rockefellers. So it's not we're not, as the middle class, creating these profits. We are. Look at the stock market. We definitely are. It's just we're not getting some of that wealth at at the bargaining table.
Do you think it's because, like with Ford and those other companies, when the parent company retired or passed away, and they handed it to that next generation who did not actually build it from the ground up, became like, let's cut it from the, for profit margins, we'll cut the bottom out. Do you feel like it was because when they changed it there, one, greed is greed, but just because you seen like when it was Henry Ford that built, when he built that, he made sure that they were looking out for the workers, and that generation, that first set of individuals were making sure that their workers were all taken care of, and there were union and everything at that time was at a better time for everybody. Like you said, it was kind of laterally moving together. But when they left, retired, or passed away, that next generation that came in does not or did not have that same core value or integrity. I will say that's an integrity thing to say, you know what, we're going to still keep that same pace. This has been successful. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to keep with that same level of respect for what our fathers built. And I'm going to say usually the fathers built these companies.
The nature of business is more though. Like for those big businesses, like the profits and stockholders, it's always about more. Like, and capitalism has been a big issue in America. So like, yeah, generation after generation watches capitalism and thinks, how can I take it further? And I could definitely see over the time it's definitely been right up.
Well, I think that we have to understand is that American companies have had pressure put on them that, in the 1970s, mass layoffs were taboo, right? That it was seen as something that was a weakness in a company.
Okay.
Because you're no longer able to take care of your workers. That means that you're not profitable, you're not investing in your talent. In the 80s and 90s, it became seen as an absolute necessity that all businesses engage in mass layoffs at some point, right? You lay off thousands of workers to cut your bottom line. And so the perspective there has changed, and it's changed largely because of, what some people would describe as modernizations, but are really intentional policies that allowed global markets to be used to leverage against each other, right? You have in the 70s and 80s pressure on GM and pressure on a lot of these large unionized manufacturers who have to compete now with foreign places. So that competition was, every excuse that businesses needed to engage some of the policies that they've engaged in over the last 30 or 40 years. And it's been a cultural change in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I will say that, if we want to focus a little bit more now, I would say that people should be cautiously optimistic about some of the opportunities that we have before us. There have been massive investments in infrastructure post-COVID. Those investments are huge. They should not be underestimated. Some of them have been rolled back, but some of them are still there. There is opportunity in the construction trades that is at a generational scale, with thousands and thousands of positions becoming available to people who can go out and make money, and you know exactly how much money you're going to make, right? And you go to college, it's all uncertain. You don't know how much you're going to pay for your degree in all likelihood. When you get done, you don't know what job you're going to get. You don't know what resources are going to be presented to you. You start a union apprenticeship in the building trades, you know exactly how much you're going to get paid, right? You know that's where that wage is, and there's more opportunity right now than there has been in, if not, definitely a generation, if not ever, definitely since probably the Eisenhower years, right? The level of investment that people don't realize this, but the level of investment in the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Chips and Science Act, those legislations, which, like I said, some of them have been rolled back, but those investments were as generational as the post-World War II investments on the same scale in terms of how much money they put into that. And, that is money that can go into ordinary workers' pockets, and, I don't think that we should underestimate the opportunity that's out there right now. Because if I I focus on the past too much, we're gonna get pretty negative, unfortunately.
I mean, and how
But-
does how does a person, you know, you mentioned like start the apprenticeship. How? What would be the
Yeah.
first step? You know, if my brother, uncle, nephew, cousin wanted to do this, what would be their first step with getting involved?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is that if you have 8,000 hours of experience in the electrical trade or pretty much any trade, you should contact your union hall because there's probably a way for you to go to work like now.
Okay.
If you are somebody who's brand new to the construction trades, you're going to want to apply to apprenticeship and probably apply to multiple apprenticeships. If you're in the Kalamazoo area, we have, we take 20 apprentices a year, which isn't a ton, but we also have local 445, which isn't too far away, and the local 153 as well. And local 153 has a whole lot of work over the next, 5 to 10 years. They're just going to need a whole lot of electricians. We'll be building Palisades nuclear plant over the next several years as well. So there's going to be a lot more opportunity. If you want to get in trades, the number one thing to do is get your hands dirty and get in there and start working. Find the opportunity. Not all opportunities may be with the union, unfortunately. But if you do go to work for one of those contractors, know that you do have the option to vote for a union as well. So that is what I would say is like if you want to get in the construction trade, start doing it. Start talking to your local union and build that relationship.
Like a lot of the times that trades have been removed out of our high schools. I think that was a big thing is that at one point in time trades were in schools. I know that Kalamazoo has at Michigan Works they have like a trade program. There's like 2 or 3 other at minimum trade programs here in Kalamazoo. They might have a little bit of experience. Like what would you say to those? Because I speak and have spoken to some of them and they're like, I've gone through this program and then I don't get a job, or they kind of cherry picked who they brought in and who they didn't. Like how does someone who has gone through there and done those due diligence, and taken their time and went through that process, how can they get involved, with a little bit of books knowledge, maybe not a lot of hands on?
Yep. I mean, for us, specifically, it's a heck of a head start. I mean, because you're still gonna essentially start off at square one with us. I mean, because we represent licensed journeymen in the state of Michigan. In order to be a licensed journeyman, you gotta have 8,000 hours of on-the-job experience. So 2,000 hours a year, 4 years of experience. You have to complete an accredited apprenticeship program. So, I mean, if somebody's, kind of, knocking out some, this is your screwdrivers, some, maybe OSHA 10 or something like that, you still have to have the 4 years of experience. You still have to complete an apprenticeship, in order to become, a journeyman inside wireman with us to complete our apprenticeship. But, it's just a heck of a head start. You're going to start off further than I started off when I applied to our apprenticeship. I built a couple decks,
Okay.
hauled some shingles up on a roof, hopefully
Okay.
put them up square,
Okay.
but yeah, it's just, if you like using your hands, and you're having difficulties, trying to figure out where to start, and one of those programs presents itself, yes, by all means, go at it. Is it, is something gonna be there waiting for you? Probably, I can't guarantee that, but
Okay.
it's a step. It's good. It's a step towards it. And if that individual shows up to an interview with me, and I don't have anything that I've taken any steps towards, I would look at that individual more than I would. Me, I guess.
One thing I try to tell, like someone in that situation that you brought up, is that when you got done with your class, even if you weren't able to get into your first apprenticeship, get some experience doing electrical work anywhere. Being an electrician is what you want to do. Just because you didn't get into the apprenticeship 1 year doesn't mean it's forever.
Okay.
You have plenty of time to get more experience, learn more about the trade, right? So, but some things that I keep coming across more and more is I want everybody to know, one, if you're going to work as an apprentice, get your electrical apprenticeship license, your electrical apprentice license, so your hours can count.
Okay.
Because a lot of people will work 15 years, never even get their apprentice license. And so like they're still right at square one. Second thing is keep track of all your hours. Keep your pay stubs. Because we're going to verify your hours later on in life. So don't work for 10 years and not be able to verify 1 hour because you keep switching contractors. So that's just a couple things that can help.
Yeah, and I will just say that if you are interested in the trades, be open-minded, you know, just because you apply to a program and don't get into that program, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, if you're applying to college, you're not going to apply to one college, right, and put all your eggs in that basket. It's the same thing with the trades, right? You have to branch out and have some stick-to-itiveness. Like I said, there are numerous locals in the state of Michigan. There are numerous locals around here for IBW. So we end up, you know, we each have our own market. We try to take the number of apprentices that we know that we can support each year. So definitely apply to more than one place is what I would say if you're really wanting to get into that apprenticeship, and then, like I said, definitely get that experience.
You had kind of mentioned earlier about people getting into positions and them just kind of being moved around, never really looking at their craftsmanship or what their, you know, what their quality of work is. And I keep going back to my dad, but I remember he was like, back in the day, people could just like go to a work site and he like, just start working, like just show what you can do. And you know, you guys laugh, but there's a lot of people that I see in Kalamazoo who are homeless. Like I ran for mayor, so when I ran for mayor, I was downtown at Martin Luther King Park, and all the guys down there is like, I'm ready to go to work today. And that was something that was so heartfelt to me, because it was like, if you want to work, you should be able to work. And it shouldn't be hard for you to be able to work, because there's so many programs that are like for low income housing where there's men who are like, I want to go to work. And you have OSHA things where you might not have the boots, you might not have the equipment, but you might even have a little bit of skill. Like some people who are homeless are not necessarily all addicts or alcoholics, or even where there's a stigma behind it. I'll just say that. And even still, if they are, is a probability of being able to get out of that depression if you can find work. Like you're probably doing these things because tomorrow's gonna look like today, and today is cold and I'm hungry. But the biblical term, if you can teach a man to fish, he'll feed himself. You know, but if you give a man a fish, and I feel like in Kalamazoo there's a lot of give a man a fish, where when I ran, men wanted to work. And even if you don't have experience or skills, like, can you move these bricks to this side? Can you help move this pole to this side of the pole? Can you put in 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever, 12 hours of something that didn't require a college degree, but I am physically able to do it. I have the heart, and at the end of the week, I can get paid. I can pay for my own hotel. I can pay for my own food. I can now, a lot of men are behind in child support, which they're stressed out that they're not taking care of their families. Like, just to like make it easier, like there's just a process, and I keep advocating, like there's so many people who want to work, and there's a lot of red tape to just get jobs. Not everybody have access to the internet. Not everybody have access to computers. Not everybody has access to these things, even to be even see this show, you know, to even get this information, because some people will not have this because of they're in survival mode. And so how to get people out of survival mode, where you, like you mentioned, there's a lot of jobs out here available, but how do you get the working want-tos to the jobs? And anybody, I'm going to speak to you because you kind of started that conversation.
Yeah, so, you know, it's a larger question, right?
Okay.
We can tell you how you go about getting into the IBW, and I talk to my members about this too, which is why is the IBW a political organization? Right? We are bigger because we know that the harder that life gets outside of our organization, the more stress it puts on our organization, right? And life outside of unions has gotten harder, right? Life inside unions has gotten harder. But I think it kind of goes back to that, right? The IBW, we've got ourselves a contract and we've got ourselves a deal. But if everyone around us is permitted to do things that we aren't permitted to do, right? So we establish certain conditions within our own work, and if we allow every other contractor around us, that makes it more difficult for us to create livelihoods for more people, right?
Okay.
If all the electrical work in this area was IBW electrical work, it would mean more opportunity for anyone who wants a job, because we would be able to take on more positions. So those are like the challenges that we face, which is workers, you know, we have to think about our own conditions and our own workers and how do we actually bring more opportunity to more people? And the answer to that is making sure that the conditions in our community are such that if you're not one of us, if you're not an IBW member, then you can't go out and make a good living, right? Because the answer isn't going to be right now to go work for only, if your only option is a union trade, then we're not going to be able to bring everyone into that tent. There just isn't that much room because the world has gotten that much, desperate outside, if that makes sense. And so individuals who maybe don't have the skill sets to come be an electrician today, what are their options, I think that we have to think about that a lot in general. Because if there are people who are willing to work, they shouldn't be homeless, right?
Amen.
And we do what we can to expand the opportunity that we can provide. I spend every day of my life thinking about how to expand that opportunity. But I don't have an answer for everyone, unfortunately, because it does require skill. It does require training. And if we were to let somebody who isn't skilled and trained onto our jobs, which it happens more these days because there's been a lot of influx of work, a lot of new workers, but it does create more hazardous conditions, right? If you're not working with construction workers who have been through OSHA, who have been through safety training, you're creating a hazard for those around you. And so the training and the things that we fight for are important. The question is, how do we expand that opportunity, make sure that everyone is getting that? And I think that number one is that if you have people who are willing to work, why are we not able to meet those people with the opportunities that are at their skill level? And then maybe they can gain those skill levels as they move on.
I agree.
And I think that the apprenticeship model is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Why don't we have manufacturers and factories that are using apprenticeship models to bring people in and train them? They want you to spend $60,000 to get a nursing degree, or a degree in, whatever other field they've got. So you're putting, not everyone has the access to borrow $60,000 to get a degree, right? So that cuts people off from opportunity. And, there was a Politico article out last year that basically said that if you counted everyone who makes a wage less than a living wage, that our effective unemployment is 25% in this country. And that's a scary number, and I think that's really responsible for what you're referring to. And we got a long ways to go.
The working poor.
Yeah.
And we had, and thank you, but we had kind of discussed too, like more of the union benefits, the retirement, the health insurance, and things along the lines of that. I kind of spoke to you gentlemen behind camera about just my father being well taken care of, and him still being, even though that he's not alive, still being able to take care of my mother, and the benefits of not just for today, like we mentioned, but how am I taking care of my family even after I'm gone? Just in general, men tend to make more money than women. So if men make more money in general in their working years, now there's some women who make great money. That's not what I'm saying. I said in general. And at retirement, I want to say men make 60 or 70% more in their retirement, and women tend to live longer. So you have women who are, if they're living off just their own, Social Security just off their own, because if you don't pay into Social Security, you don't get Social Security. So people who are having to live off of a lot less because they're often women who are still behind after their husbands have passed away, where with the union, there are great benefits that still took care of my father. From that example, it took care of, he had the best medical care. When he needed, and again, his Social Security still takes care of my mother and different things along the lines of that. Not just focus on today's life, but the legacy that you live behind, So anybody can I think you kind of spoke on that as well too.
Well, John can definitely speak more about the health insurance, that's for sure. But we have, our health insurance is ours and ours alone. It's through Blue Cross Blue Shield, but the only way to get it is to be a union electrician in the state of Michigan. And your employer's gonna pay for it. It's going to cover the spouse, and then, it's going to cover the worker, the spouse, and all the dependents. You're going to get $1 an hour into your health savings account that you use for any out-of-pocket medical expense. I mean, you know, I could talk about the wage package, so I'm probably blue in the face because that's kind of my job. I tell people all the time, you know, we make $64.19 an hour, but we see $42.78 on the check. You know, the other $21.41 is going to be a couple forms of retirement.
Yep.
You know, your health insurance that covers your whole household.
Yeah.
You know, and then kind of some administrative kind of we kind of push around. It's, you know, I don't want to make myself sound less, but you know, I've never, you know, I've happily just kind of walked through life, I should say. You know, kind of stumbled upon this apprenticeship through a friend of the family. You know, and you know, 40's on the horizon for me in a handful of months here. You know, about 8-9 years ago, I was like, all right, you know, I'm in my 30s. You know, I got some retirement I should start worrying about. You know, I know I've had health insurance this whole time. Now look into my retirement, I've had this much. Like, yeah, I was like, all right, you know, but I'm on track to have this much. You know, so it's just, you know, it's a good way to be. You know, I wake up, you know, well, I used to when I was an electrician out in the field, you know, wake up in the morning, you know, drink a coffee, watch some news, put on some decent clothes, go to work, don't damage property, don't damage yourself, you know, leave for craftsmanship work, you know, and everything just kind of falls right into place as it's supposed to. It's you know, you just worry about yourself and everybody else around you, and just kind of it happens, you know, and I know I'm spoiled because of it.
And that's a good thing. Like, that is a good thing. Like, you know, or people are like, you're spoiled. Like, my daddy worked really hard to make sure his girls were spoiled. And his son, you know, he took pride in, like,
I don't want to downplay where I am. You know, I had to work
all.
very hard,
Yep.
you know, to get this far. You know, it wasn't an easy path, that's for sure. But, you know, it's there, you know, and it's great.
I've talked to a lot of non-union workers who are interested in coming in, and it really surprises me how many of them are paying like $200 a week, 52 weeks a year for a 30-year career. And I'm trying to explain to them like the difference. Like, so he just explained it. So I never paid for healthcare. I never had to put money of mine into retirement. Compound interest, 52 weeks a year, 30-year career. Like, that's a lot of money when we're already, as the working people, getting taxed almost 30%. So people like want to know why the middle class is shrinking. Look, the games, it's already compressing on you already when you look at that. And that's just with healthcare and retirement.
Yeah, when every child costs an extra $200 a month on your insurance, people wonder why the birth rate's gone down. It's not shocking, right? There are people out there who want to have kids and they're waiting until their mid-30s. Well, how many kids you can have if you don't start until your mid-30s?
Yep, true.
You know, we've created the economic conditions in this country with, you know, our policy priorities. You know, unions can't solve everything, but they are a step in the right direction of gaining your own voice and getting a say in that. In the IBEW, we want all electrical workers to know that no matter where you're working, if you're pulling wire, if you're terminating things, the IBEW can represent you, period. And if we can get that message out, that's the number one thing, right? That's the number one thing, to make sure that we're expanding the opportunities that we create, and making sure that the work in this town goes towards those opportunities. It's vitally important, and a lot of people want to dismiss unions as, you know, special interests. We're not special. We're ordinary, right? We're ordinary interests, and people need to, you know, engage that thought process, that the interest of ordinary people has been forgotten.
Amen.
And in this town, we can do a lot to fix that. There's the will there. There just needs to be some more education, and you should keep a lookout for that, because we'll be doing some more education. We'll be doing more outreach around here.
Where?
So I don't have a date yet.
Okay.
I've been very busy, but I do intend to have some workshops where we invite people out, most likely at my hall, to discuss exactly the things that we discussed here today a little bit more in depth.
And by all means, please share your information one more time for that camera that's going off, that, you know, anything else that you want us to know, the city to know, We'll start with you. We'll go this way.
Yeah, so just my name, position again.
Any and everything, and even
Yep, so
kiss the baby and all that good stuff.
yeah, so Jonathan Current, IBW Local 131 Business Manager, Financial Secretary. I represent electrical workers in Kalamazoo and work every day to expand opportunity for anyone who's working in our trade.
Ryan Lewis, I'm the membership development for Local 131 in Kalamazoo, and you know, I go to battle with John every day. Someone's got to do it.
Thank you.
My name's Cameron. I'm an organizer. I'm working all over the state. If you have any questions about coming to the IBEW, ibewmichigan.com. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And providing for your family doesn't have to be a death sentence. That's it.
And Cameron, can you kind of elaborate a little bit more in your role and your position? Even if we run off camera there, this one is still running. And so,
Oh man, okay. So my role is just about everything. So I go to job sites, I talk to workers, I work on online campaigns like through Canva. I've helped on discrimination cases with other contractors, card signings all over the state, job fairs. Basically, I just help with whatever organizing activities that they want to do in the state. I just try to help